Hello, everyone, and welcome to our security session today, Raising the Bar on Data Security. Thank you for attending FormFest. Thank you for attending our session. I know I've seen some of you in multiple sessions already. We appreciate you, and we hope you like the content that we're producing today. And for today's session, or pardon me, there's been several sessions today. For this afternoon's session, I'm joined by our Director of Security and Compliance, David Scavetta. David, hello.
Hello, Josh, and hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining and appreciate the introduction, Josh. Looking
Of
forward to
course.
talking.
Yeah. Looking forward to your presentation. Before we get started, just a quick couple notes on housekeeping. Here is our set list for today. We're going to touch on compliance attainments and what it means for an organization, a vendor like FormAssembly, to attain a compliance standard. We're going to dive into security documentation, where you can find, the actual documents that support security and compliance standards. And then we're going to jump into a guide to how to harden your own FormAssembly instance and make sure that you are using our security features to make the data that you collect and the data inside of your system as secure as possible. Some really cool stuff. David produced a lot of this content. We really appreciate it, David. Your expertise is invaluable. Before we get started on our first section about compliance attainments, I wanted to poll the audience and get a sense of what our level of knowledge is, or which compliance standards you're familiar with. This is a multi-select poll, unlike some of the others that you may have seen during the user conference. You can actually select which ones you're familiar with. If you give a click on the screen, you can hover over any of these names. Which of them are you familiar with? And Dave, while we let people choose, I'd be interested, which one do you think is going to be the one that everyone's familiar with?
Oof, if I was a betting man, I would say SOC 2, just because in my world, I think that I hear about the most and resonates the most frequently, but well, I guess I have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll let people click a little bit. I know this can catch some people off guard. I'll give you 10 seconds. I don't want to hold us up too much, but just a nice, it's nice to get a sense for the familiarity that our audience has. So as David goes through his presentation, he'll be able to perhaps target the content a little bit better for you. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up our poll in 5 seconds. Get your answers in if you'd like before we jump on in, and then we'll take a look at what our audience is familiar with. I'm going to go ahead and throw up the numbers now. All right. Hey, David Betting Man, he's the winner, SOC 2, and it looks like it just kind of goes down the list. ISO 27001, FedRAMP, PCI DSS, and then very unfamiliar with EU-US DPF, Data Protection Framework. Interesting. Thank you, audience, for humoring us. David, with this knowledge, I'm going to turn things over to you for the rest of the presentation.
Sounds great, Josh. And yeah, those numbers don't really surprise me. The SOC 2 and ISO 27001 standards are the ones I hear most frequently about. So with that said, since those two are our focus points, let's start with an overview. Security and compliance reports like SOC 2 and ISO, the general ISO series of frameworks, I should say, they provide a pretty independent validation that a security organization's security practices meets rigorous industry standards. It's about building trust, reducing risk, and demonstrating a proactive commitment to protecting data. They're really designed to provide an objective, audit-based opinion about the state of your operational security or a vendor or service partner's security. Now, there are some distinctions between the two, and I'm going to go a little more in depth. I'm going to talk a little more about what's involved. But let's start with ISO 27001. Now, this standard tends to be more EU focused, and it emphasizes a comprehensive approach to managing information security risks. It covers a variety of different areas, but the most prominent is really risk management and mitigation, security policies and how you apply that as a level of governance, access controls, in some cases physical security, as well as cryptography, incident management, and incident response, as well as business continuity, availability. So really, it covers a pretty broad framework. The ISO audit starts, and forgive me, I say ISO, but I'm referring explicitly to ISO 27001. But the audit process starts with planning, where we're looking at the audit scope and objectives. And it really kind of starts at that foundational level. And it starts on multiple stages, where stage 1 checks the readiness and documentation, and stage 2 involves a deeper evaluation and actual assessment of how well that comprehensive system and framework of governance is really implemented and maintained. Once an organization goes through that audit, a report is issued to the organization with detailed findings and any what they call nonconformities. Nonconformity from the SOC 2 world, that's a deficiency. So anything that didn't quite meet the control criteria. So the organization generally has a brief window to address these issues through corrective actions, and if everything is addressed, then the certificate is granted. But I think what's most important is that this isn't a one-time thing with ISO 27001. It's generally an annual exercise that an organization has to go through, going between surveillance audits and full cycle audits every 3 years. SOC 2, however, is a little bit different in that a SOC 2 Type 2 is looking at the design and operating effectiveness of those controls over a set period of time. And that set period of time is really determined by the organization. It can range anywhere from 3 months all the way to 12 months. And it also has a particular focus of scope. Generally, these are called trust services criteria. And there are 5 of these, but they always have to include at least security. So for your organization, as you're looking through your vendors, and I'm including FormAssembly in this, do peruse the trust services criteria that they include in that. Now, going a little more in depth as to the actual review that happens with the audit. The auditor, similar to ISO 27001, is sitting down with the organization, key stakeholders, system leads, et cetera, and reviewing evidence and documentation and testing each control. So they're looking at service desk tickets, system configurations, configuration changes, event logs, meeting notes. And the idea is they really want to see that the controls they're inspecting have been operating as the policies say they should across that period of time. Now, once the audit is completed, the firm issues a detailed report with a detailed description of the system, how everything works. And the meat and potatoes of the report is really in the control listings that are kind of more usually towards the end of the report. But these go into the actual test for each control and will give you kind of a pass or fail for each of those. Now, what's important about these two is that these really do require an organization to prove to an auditor with evidence that each of these control areas have been operating the way they're designed and frankly, the way they are telling customers they are designed. Looking at how well these reports are formulated, how often they're delivered, these should be really important to, even if you are not an organization that has one, you very likely have service partners and vendors that do offer them. And they can be a wealth of information that you can take more than just taking an organization's word for it, that they do have strong security measures in place, and that there's an actual audit that goes on that's actually kicking the tires of each of those security areas and really putting their own name on the line to pass on that validation. There's also a lot of really fruitful content in those SOC 2 reports. You can really get an idea of their scope, how their business operates, how their technical layer operates, and things you can take away, specifically complementary user entity controls. I know that's a bit of wordsmithing there, but those are generally controls that would be passed on to the customer directly for, these are the things you should do, like have a point of contact with the service provider, things like that. Now, that's a lot of information for any one company to distribute, and it can be really difficult to pass on that information where you have a variety of customers and things like that. So that brings me to my next point, enter our trust center. But before we dive into that, I'd like to pass it back to Josh, who I think has another poll.
Yes, and I got a lot of feedback on our last poll. So as we move through the other polls, audience, I will include options for none of the above, which was very funny. Thank you all for noting that. This one won't need a none of the above, but as David mentioned, we're going to be talking about trust centers next. Have you visited one of your vendors' trust centers to view their security documentation? It's either a yes or, in this case, never heard of them. And you can tell I'm a marketing person because anything I write ends in an exclamation mark. Forgive me, but attendees, as with the previous poll, if you can just click the answer that best fits your situation, I'll give you about 10 seconds and then we'll throw the numbers and we'll see where we land with this one. I'm going to go ahead and place my bet on, I feel like since our audience wasn't super familiar with security and compliance standards that we showed earlier, I bet many of them have yet to visit a trust center for one of their softwares. This is a part of, generally a procurement process, but that's going to be my bet. We've got more than 50% of the attendees having clicked, so I'm going to throw up the results. Oh, all right. Tighter here. 30% of you report having visited a trust center already, and about 65% of you, not so much. Interesting. David, tell us a little bit more about trust centers.
So with those numbers in mind, I'm actually really excited to talk about this one. Not just because of my current role, because I've been working in the security and compliance space for quite a number of years now. And I'm really excited that trust centers has become a thing. Looking from trust centers from an organizational perspective, it can be really a significant undertaking to build a process to share sensitive security documentation, SOC 2 reports, ISO reports, pen testing, just security questionnaire type information. And if you have a large volume of customers, especially where you have things like non-disclosure agreements, maybe you want to watermark your reports, it can be really, really difficult and quite a lot of work to really manage that. So that's led to, the proliferation of trust centers. And all these basically are web portals designed to be end user facing. So for your customers, well, I guess from my perspective, it would be our customers and our partners, but a lot of companies offer this now, to allow security documentation to be available as more of a self-service model. I was reading through a recent survey with Wistic of 520 companies that they surveyed. About 81% of them now offer some form of trust center. And if you are in any way responsible for security or compliance, procurement, or maybe just performing due diligence against your service providers, these trust centers can be a really great and straightforward way to get a lot of the information that you'd otherwise look for and traditionally have more of a back and forth in trying to get that information. So I'm sure Josh will share more information about this later, but our link to our security portal is right there. It's just security.formassembly.com. And things you'll be able to find here. So I mentioned earlier, you'll be able to find our SOC 2 Type 2 report, our ISO 27001 report, pen testing, general questions, any service updates we have relating to our security, especially since we do work with AWS, for example, as our primary infrastructure provider. So if there was a security issue we needed to relay, that would be where we would share that information. And it's really just a fantastic piece that I'm glad to see more of becoming popular in the industry, not just for FormAssembly, but kind of across the board. My team does vendor reviews and infrastructure assessments kind of across the board, and we do this annually. So for us, it's been really a game changer to make collecting and perusing that information a lot easier. So that leads me into our next section where I want to talk a little bit more about our tech stack. But I believe, Josh, you have another poll for us?
You teed me up perfectly, David, mentioning your team as someone who does these annual audits and preparing these materials for our audience. Another poll: who at your organization is responsible for securing your environments? And you'll note the "I'm not sure" button at the end allows you to opt out essentially of this poll. I'm learning as we go. Thank you all for your feedback and understanding. Like looking at the audience and just, we've got a variety of industries represented. And I know that we've probably got a variety of size of organization as well. It really depends on the type of organization. It's really, I don't want to say personal, but it's organizational dependent, I think, which team or type of team owns this, owns security and compliance. I've heard different things from higher ed than I've heard in nonprofits. I think we're going to see a surprising spread here. All right, I think we've gotten into the poll groove because we got up to 50% of attendees answering really quickly. Get those last clicks in. I'm going to close this out and then we're going to see the results. Oh, well, I'm surprised again, man. Mostly the IT team. No, I guess that's not a huge surprise, but we've heard them all. Security team, some have a dedicated security team. Very interesting. A couple not sures, and only a few, probably one each. Does that responsibility live with the engineering team or the legal team? Very interesting. All right. Thank you all for this information. David, I'll turn things back over to you for the next section.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Those numbers are really interesting because depending upon where security surfaces, you get a very unique lens from each department that may be operating from. So from my own perspective, it's very insightful to see. But what I want to dive into in these next few slides is hardening your tech stack, not just FormAssembly, which we'll talk about a little more, but generally across the board. If you are responsible for third-party security, managing your vendors and service provider, managing your supply chain, there are a lot of very practical things you can do. And the first thing that I would absolutely recommend is, of your service providers, first thing to do, look to their trust centers. Bookmark them, make sure they're easily available. Usually, even if you are conducting security reviews maybe every year, if you are looking for information on security notifications, maybe significant changes, anything like that, those are fantastic portals to just have bookmarked and have them kind of operate as a single pane of glass. But while security framework and compliance documentation serve a pretty good, what I would call the groundwork for a strong security posture, you really want to look at the technical hardening of your service providers, of their infrastructure. Compliance alone isn't protection, but looking at the information that you can obtain through a trust portal will really give you an opportunity to strengthen your tech stack, identify gaps, and then kind of marry them against your particular risk appetite. What kind of things are most important to your organization? Where do you see the most risk? These days, a lot of service providers are kind of becoming very spread out in terms of their downstream dependencies, their infrastructure providers, their third and fourth party providers. So it can be a lot to take in. And proactive defense really does mean going beyond the checklist. So if they do have trust centers, so for example, AWS has what's called their, I think it's artifact repository, where you can request their security reports. But you really want to kind of dive into more than just the compliance reports. Look to their patching methodologies, look at their recent pen tests, identify their infrastructure providers, and get a real sense for how these things line up to what's important to your organization. Now, there are a number of additional things that you can take a closer look at when you are conducting these assessments. So looking at the cloud infrastructure they use, so whether they are AWS and cloud-based, or if they are hosted in a local data center, or maybe they're a shared co-location, that may have a different risk message to one organization versus another. I would definitely encourage everyone to review your service providers at least annually. Take advantage of the native controls that each of your service providers has. And one example of this that I really do love to talk about is zero trust. So if you're not familiar with it, zero trust really allows for contextual-based access decisions as a user is attempting to access an environment. So traditionally, it's been username and password, you put in your MFA code, and then kind of you're in. What zero trust allows you to do is provide more context into that authentication assertion. Where are you trying to log in from? From what device? Is the device secure and up to date? And you compare this downstream with how these users are accessing applications. One thing I'm happy to talk about a little more is that FormAssembly does offer a SAML integration, and with a variety of IAM partners. So I'm thinking Okta, Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, OneLogin. A lot of these providers allow for zero trust based contextual modeling in the authentication process. So I would not be intimidated by the buzzwords. If you use any of these IAM providers, I would encourage you to take a closer look at them. Maybe there are some basic things that you can put into place. But as a general theme, kind of taking a step back a bit, there are four kind of general areas that I try to keep an eye on. Securing the product, securing the supply chain, securing the people, and managing your risk. A lot of security at the end of the day comes down to, are you aware of the risk and are you comfortable accepting it? And that tends to be an organizational decision. A lot of industries and organizations have just different risk tolerances. But that being said, I alluded to earlier talking a little bit more about what one can do to harden and better secure their FormAssembly instance. I'd like to talk a little more bit about that, but Josh, I think we have another poll.
Surprise, I'm back again with another poll. I hope these are helpful because I realize there's a lot of them now. This is the last one. Audience, we'd love to understand which of the FormAssembly security features that we currently offer are you using for your account? And I did include a none of the above on this as well. We've also gotten some questions about some specific security features. We're going to cover some things in the Q&A, so don't think that these polls are the only way that I'm going to get answers from you. We will cover some of the additional live questions at the end here. So this might be a stumper for some of you if you're not, an admin on your account, if you're not, configuring SSO, if you're not enabling some of these secure file scan features. These are typically only available to FormAssembly admins, but there's a chance that you have heard of some of these and enacted some of these yourselves. All right. We are closing in on that 50% number, which is what I've been looking for kind of as my poll closer. So I'm going to give you 3 more seconds, and then let's look at the results. All right. We see people using our user access controls. We had a question about MFA in the question that we'll cover a little bit later. Some secure file scan, sensitive field settings, a favorite, I know, obfuscating, and then of course keeping track of who accesses data, and then purging. Good to see purging on there, important for some of the security and compliance standards that David covered earlier. All right, thank you, David. Let's talk about hardening a FormAssembly instance.
Yeah, so I really love hardening guidelines, so I was really excited to work with Josh on these slides in particular, because I love it when I can work with a vendor and they tell me these are the things you should do to really maximize your use of our product. And there's a couple of things here that I think Josh will have a link that he can share later today with more of the details on this, but I am going to describe more in detail a little bit here about what some of these things are. First and foremost, absolutely review user privileges and user groups. One thing that I feel is nice about FormAssembly is you can be fairly detailed in which users you want to have to be form administrators, who you want to be system administrators, how you want to control access to some of the potentially sensitive data that you may be collecting via responses. So it's definitely worth some time going through and making sure that users enrolled in your FormAssembly instance are appropriately privileged. I would absolutely also encourage everyone to take advantage of SAML. If you don't have SAML for whatever reason, absolutely multi-factor authentication. There are a variety of really good security reasons to do so. Our platform makes it pretty easy to set that up and enforce it if you see fit. I would also, some other best practice, monitor and ingest your use of sensitive data. Configure field level security, and consider data purging. Data purging is a fantastic feature if you are concerned with use and collection of sensitive data, but maybe you're not sure about how long you need to retain it. Maybe you're working on incremental projects. And let's say, for example, you have a 6-month project where you are collecting that information, but you don't think you're going to need it long term. So I guess generally for handling sensitive information, best practices like don't keep it if you don't need it. And data purging is an excellent way to really enforce the expunging, I would say, of that data after a set period of time. And you get to decide for yourselves in your instance what that time period would be. I would also encourage everyone, conduct a privacy impact assessment every so often. Look at what you're collecting within your system. Does that match up with the purpose and objectives of whatever project or initiative you have? That may help temper your approach into data purging and deleting response data after a certain period of time. There's some additional things you can do, such as implementing input field validation. So this helps to ensure that the data you collect is accurate and it's properly formatted. It's consistent with the output that you're expecting to see from the system. And it just generally helps to improve data quality. Secure file scan can be really beneficial if you are concerned with malware, things like that. So I would definitely encourage everyone to turn that on. Session termination and password controls gives end user administrators some flexibility in designing what kind of, how secure they want to be versus, I guess, a degree of convenience there. And lastly, every so often, I would say at least once a year, look at the enabled connectors you have. Maybe at the same time you check who your admins in the system, and look at your third-party integrations. Are they still being utilized? Are they still operating correctly? Are they still integrated well? Maybe there are more things to add or things to remove. Now, that's a brief overview. And as I mentioned, we'll be sharing more information about this. A lot of organizations provide similar security standards. So I'm really happy that FormAssembly is joining the community of companies that has some kind of a hardening standard or guideline or best practice that is generally out there to be consumed directly by customers. Reviewing and applying these standards is a really easy way to maximize the security of your instance and ensure that it kind of has its best, most secure foot forward. So I think that brings me to the end of my presentation, but I would be very happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. Before we move into Q&A, just a call out that hardening guide, kind of a long form of it, we've published in our blog. David goes step by step through several of the security features that will help you make your instance more secure. That link is in the resources center, as well as a link to security.formassembly.com, our trust center. So those are some of the resources that David mentioned earlier today. So if you need access to those, head on over there and you'll be able to access them. We're getting a lot of questions. Let me try and grab some of the older ones that came through during the session. I know a lot of you, communicated with me about our polls. And, I had some very funny notes, but I'm going to keep our Q&A on track here. We had a question, David, during other FormFest sessions. There's been a lot of talk about Google Sheets and our Google Sheets connector. This audience member's security team doesn't consider Google Sheets safe for protecting personal data, PII. Do you have an opinion on that? Our connectors are secure, but I do understand perhaps that when you pass information into a collaboration platform like Google Sheets, where you expect perhaps other users to be able to access information, I can see where they're coming from there. Do you have an opinion on that?
So I would say my answer is probably a little nuanced, which maybe is expected from a security professional. But Google Sheets is a really powerful platform, but it's also really difficult to if you are ingesting and parsing sensitive data in that, and you want to keep that very restricted to a particular individuals or a particular group, it takes a bit more work to enforce that, and you have to work within the confines of Google's ecosystem to make sure that that is appropriately hardened. And there is some nuance as far as drive controls, file controls, sharing controls. So at the end of the day, I wouldn't say it's insecure or inherently an inappropriate platform for sensitive data, but I will concede it may take more work to secure sensitive data once it's in there, because you may have to control access privileges to those files, to those shared drives, depending upon how you work within the Google Workspace ecosystem.
I think that was an appropriate amount of nuance. This is a question I've gotten from a couple of our audience members, David, and I'm not, it wasn't necessarily a part of this presentation, but I want to hear your thoughts. Some of our audience members have struggled with bots or spam coming through their forms. Is there a way for them, in your opinion, a best practice to try to mitigate that?
So this is, I have seen this. It is unfortunately rather prevalent. It's not unique to FormAssembly, and it is absolutely a scourge kind of across the board. As far as immediate things that one can take, I would absolutely encourage the use of reCAPTCHA, which should be a form by form, something that can be enabled. That should prevent the bot and the spam bots from doing whatever they're looking to do. So that is a one good practice. I know we have another integration, the name escapes me, but I think there's one other service provider that we can integrate with that does provide a layer of spam protection. I would say another way just might be kind of, and this might be tough to avoid, just being mindful of where you may be sharing those links. And it's kind of tough, if you're sharing a poll on Twitter, you're kind of doing so because you want a very wide breadth of audience to be able to be reached. At the same time, though, that can often be where those bots get those particular URLs, and that's kind of how they snatch them up. I can follow up with the latter point, but reCAPTCHA is definitely the best first place to start.
Yeah, and I think, was the provider Akismet?
Yes, thank you,
yes.
Josh.
Yes, no problem. It actually it escaped. Pardon me, that's my calendar notification. It escaped me too, but several members of our audience tossed that into the Q&A. Thank you, gang. Barney notes that they are using Akismet and have found it to be effective in blocking spam. To audience members looking for a solution, please do visit our help center, help.formassembly.com. Jump in there and search AKISMET or reCAPTCHA, and you should find some documentation on enabling both of those for your forms. I love this question because it's something that I've wondered, especially when we rolled out MFA last year. Jimmy asks, if FormAssembly is accessed only through the FormAssembly app in our Salesforce org, is SAML MFA still recommended? We already have MFA set up for our Salesforce org. What's your opinion on that, David?
So is SAML required? Should SAML be required for FormAssembly if it's already required for Salesforce?
Yes, and specifically, they're accessing FormAssembly through the Salesforce app, which allows the embedded FormAssembly experience inside of the Salesforce experience. It's kind of a nested experience.
If it was me, I would say yes. Take the time to set it up anyway, because if nothing else, the administration for that integration still kind of resides in the FormAssembly instance. So it's an additional security measure to kind of just protect that level of access. And with that, you can set up additional measures of MFA with that. So if it was me, I probably would.
I don't think that should be a surprise. The security guy's like, yes, have it everywhere. Friends, I've realized that we've gone over on our session. We've had some great questions. David, you put together a fantastic presentation, but we have one more session that I want to make sure we give time for this audience to get to. Before you go, just a quick call out on the resources we mentioned earlier. You can, of course, access our trust base at security.formassembly.com. There's a link for that. And you can feel free to read the instance hardening guide. It's a blog post. I'm hoping to provide a downloadable version of that in the weeks to come. So grab that link, bookmark it in your browser, and I should be able to get something that you can take with you as well. And for many of you, I understand that security and some of the compliance terms were new, and our security features are not available on every FormAssembly plan, as some of you have noted in the Q&A. Especially some of our single user plans do not include some of the login controls, user permissioning, etc. If you need those to meet your organization's security stance, please do reach out to our team. I've got a link for a 15-minute call. They should be able to get some requirements from you, some of your needs, and get you set up with a discussion with someone on our team to get you into the plan that fits your needs. I understand that, kind of across the board, across industries, security is becoming more of a focus for software vendors. We here at FormAssembly obviously are ready to support that and your needs. People like David make sure that we maintain our security and compliance standards. We want to help you maintain yours. Please feel free to reach out to our sales team. They will be able to hook you up with the right plan, or at least get you the resources you need to make a decision there. David, before we go, I want to just make sure that you get a chance to say goodbye, and thank you again for this presentation.
Thank you again, Josh, for having me. I love talking about this kind of stuff, and thank you everyone on the call for listening. I appreciate everyone's time.
Yes, thank you, audience. Enjoy the final session, and do come back for day 2 of FormFest tomorrow. We've got at least, I think, 8 more sessions to go tomorrow. We start a little bit earlier. Check out the registration link for more, and we'll see you at the next session. Ta-ta.